A Secret Crush Romance written by Serena Hart. Prologue. Some stories don't begin with a crescendo. They begin with a whisper. A late arrival to math class. The quiet flick of a paper note across a desk. A fleeting glance that was too brief to mean anything, and yet, it meant everything. Emma Brooks had never believed in the grand romance of destiny. She believed in the hard truths of numbers, in the rigid timelines of scholarship applications, in clutching what little control she could in a world that offered her so little certainty. Love was a fragile, expensive luxury, and she was a girl who couldn't afford it. Not when bills waited like hungry ghosts on the kitchen table, and her mother's tired cough lingered like a shadow through the quiet hours of the night. But Lucian Carter didn't follow rules. Not the schools, not the worlds, and certainly not the ones Emma had carefully constructed for herself. He moved through her life with a quiet confidence, as if he belonged in every version of her future, even the one she had never dared to dream. At first she thought he didn't see her at all. Then one day he did. And in that singular moment, the world tilted on its axis and nothing was ever the same. This isn't a story about the kind of first love found in movies. It's not about grand declarations or cinematic kisses under a canopy of stars. It's about the silent, heart-stopping moment when someone truly sees you for the first time, and you realize you've been spending your whole life trying not to be seen at all. Chapter 1. Distant Stars. Emma Brooks sat tucked into the back row of room 205, her pencil moving in a slow, hypnotic rhythm across the margin of her notebook. Her mind was no longer taking notes. It was composing a silent sonata of thought. Mr. Denham's droning lecture on trigonometric identities became a gentle hum, a distant sound beneath the symphony of her own racing heart. He was there again. Lucian Carter arrived late as always. He strode in with the kind of effortless grace only the truly devastatingly cool could possess, his dark jacket unzipped like a casual challenge, his basketball shoes squeaking a soft, familiar protest against the linoleum floor. He offered Mr. Denham a quick, almost charming half-apology, and then, with a quiet confidence, dropped into the empty seat one row over from hers. He tilted his chair back as if gravity was a personal friend of his, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. He didn't look at her. Not even a passing glance. Emma quickly lowered her eyes, a familiar warmth spreading across her cheeks. Her heart thudded a clumsy, predictable rhythm, a beat she hated with a passion. She despised how juvenile, how transparent she felt around him. 17, with a near-perfect GPA and a mind sharp enough to tutor calculus, yet she was powerless to stop the simple, undeniable flutter in her chest whenever Lucian leaned back and raked a hand through his midnight black hair. In the margin of her notebook, she wrote, "Don't look. Don't stare. Don't feel." It didn't help. The truth was she had been watching him for 2 years. Quietly. Carefully. She observed him like a painting in a museum, beautiful and utterly off-limits, cordoned off by a velvet rope of rules she had painstakingly woven for herself. It wasn't just his striking looks, though those were undeniably a part of it. It was the beautiful contradictions she saw in him. The way he could get into a fight one day and then, when no one was watching, stop to pet the janitor's dog. How he wore a smirk like a shield against the world, yet somehow knew the names of every teacher and what made them smile. The way he teased her in passing, with words that sounded insignificant to everyone else but felt like they had been carved just for her. "Brooks. Still saving the world one mathlete competition at a time?" he had said once, flicking a folded paper football her way in detention. She hadn't replied. She just blushed and pretended to read, the words a gentle ache in her chest. She didn't know what she was to him. An inside joke? A curiosity? Or perhaps nothing at all? And because Emma Brooks had long ago decided she couldn't afford to want things she couldn't have, she stayed silent. The final bell rang, a loud, jarring sound that broke the spell. Her classmates scrambled out, their eager footsteps echoing in the hallway. Emma gathered her books slowly, a reluctance settling in her bones. Lucian was still there, slouched in his chair, his long fingers moving across the screen of his phone. She allowed herself one quick glance. Just enough to capture the sharp, perfect line of his jaw in the golden afternoon light. Just enough to hate herself for the whisper of a hope that he would speak to her. He didn't. She walked out alone, a ghost in her own life. The house was cold when she got home, a familiar chill clinging to the air from the thermostat being turned down to save money. Her mother's coat still hung on the hook, but her car was gone. Emma didn't need to check the messages. She already knew. Her mom had picked up an extra shift at the diner. She heated instant noodles, balancing the fragile bowl on a stack of overdue library books, and began grading practice exams from her tutoring session. The kitchen light hummed overhead, a lonely, persistent sound. She tried to ignore the silence, but it wrapped itself around her like a blanket woven of static. Her phone buzzed once, a small vibration that felt like a crack in the stillness. Rent short again. Can you pull from your savings this month? Mom. Emma stared at the message for a long moment, then turned her phone face down. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in months. Crying was a luxury, a frivolous waste of energy that didn't pay utility bills or shrink hospital invoices or get her any closer to a scholarship. So she took a deep, steadying breath, opened her laptop, and applied for a third part-time job. Later that night, after the house had grown even colder and she was wrapped in 3 layers of blankets, Emma opened the small drawer in her nightstand. She pulled out her navy blue notebook, old, with frayed corners and pages filled with the secrets of her heart. October 14th, he laughed today. At something dumb a girl said. I was 2 rows behind him, but the sound of it echoed in my chest for the rest of the hour. It's pathetic. I know. November 2nd. He brushed my wrist when he passed me the detention sheet. It's not a sign. Just skin on skin. But it felt like one. She closed the journal quickly, hugging it to her chest. A fierce wave of fear washed over her. If anyone ever found it? No, they couldn't. Especially not him. Because Lucian Carter wasn't meant for people like her. The next morning brought a cold rain and a substitute teacher to room 205. Lucian wasn't there. Emma should have felt a quiet relief, a sense of control returning. But instead, she felt an ache of emptiness. He was probably skipping again. Maybe he was at the gym. Or maybe he was with that girl from the cheer squad who always smelled like strawberries and smiled with practiced easy grace. Emma forced herself to focus, her eyes fixed on the board, her hands moving with neat precision across her notebook. But halfway through the lesson, a folded piece of paper landed gently beside her elbow. She blinked. She looked up. Lucian was behind her now, his arm draped casually over his desk, his head tilted lazily, a subtle question in his eyes. Their gazes met for a split second, his unreadable, hers wide with a shock of confusion. She looked down at the paper. Why do you always look like you're fighting with your own brain? Her heart skipped a beat, then another. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Because for the first time, he had gently, deliberately, crossed the velvet rope she had placed around her feelings. And she had no idea what that meant. Emma didn't turn around. She pressed her lips together and unfolded the paper again, staring at the smooth, slightly messy scrawl of his handwriting as if the letters would magically rearrange themselves into something less absurd. Why do you always look like you're fighting with your own brain? What kind of question was that? A dozen possible responses flashed through her mind, witty, dismissive, painfully honest, but none of them made it past the knot in her throat. She had spent years perfecting the art of pretending Lucian Carter didn't affect her. Writing back in any capacity would be an admission, a quiet confession. So she slipped the note inside her notebook, a tiny, forbidden secret, and returned to the math problem on the board. The numbers steadied her. Unlike feelings, numbers followed rules. Still, she felt his gaze, a quiet, persistent warmth, between her shoulder blades. After class, Emma stayed behind to ask the substitute a question, a ritual more than a necessity. It was her way of ensuring Lucian had time to leave first, of maintaining her carefully constructed distance. But when she stepped into the corridor 5 minutes later, he was waiting. Leaning against the lockers as if it were the most natural thing in the world, a scene straight out of a teen drama she would never, ever admit to watching. Hey, genius. Emma's steps faltered. His smile was a little crooked, a little unsure, as if he knew he was breaking some invisible rule by speaking to her directly in public. She looked around, the hallway was mostly empty. Still, she kept her voice low and cautious. Hi. So, are you gonna answer me? She blinked. What? The note. I thought it was rhetorical. Maybe it was, he said, a corner of his mouth lifting in a gentle smirk. Maybe I was just curious if you'd respond at all. She clutched her binder tighter, her knuckles turning white. Why? He leaned in just slightly, and Emma caught a faint, intoxicating trace of cedar and mint. Because I don't think you've ever said more than 10 words to me, and I've been in at least 4 of your classes since freshman year. Her eyes narrowed. And you counted? He chuckled, a warm, low sound that settled deep in her bones. Guilty. She stared at him, trying to make sense of this new version of him. This wasn't teasing. Not exactly. His voice lacked the sharp, playful edge he used with other girls. There was something else here, a gentle sincerity layered with a kind of quiet, patient curiosity. I just don't see the point in small talk, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's inefficient. "In that case," he said, stepping aside with a small theatrical bow, "I'll be sure to make all future conversations wildly profound." Emma couldn't help it. A small, involuntary smile bloomed on her lips. It was fleeting. He noticed. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, the navy blue notebook unopened beside her. For the first time in months, she didn't write in it. Because what could she possibly say? He spoke to me. He knew how many classes we have together. He made me smile. It sounded ridiculous. And more than that, it sounded dangerous. Like hope. And hope, Emma knew from a lifetime of careful observation, was a luxury she couldn't afford. It was a terrifying, expensive thing. A week passed. Lucian didn't speak to her again. Not directly. But she found herself noticing him more than ever. How he always sat closer now, sometimes just a single desk away. How he lingered when class ended, how he would sometimes pause in the hallways as if waiting. He never said another word, but the silence between them was suddenly heavier, more charged. It was messing with her head. She hated how much she thought about it. One rainy Thursday, the school posted a notice about mandatory community service hours. Students could choose between tutoring, maintenance, or library assistance. Emma signed up for the last, quiet, solitary, predictable. Which was why she nearly dropped her pen when the coordinator said, "Oh, wonderful. That makes 2 of you for the back room." Emma turned. Lucian. He was signing the same clipboard, a quiet smirk playing on his lips. "Don't tell me you're here for the silence too, Brooks." "Why are you here?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Maybe I'm a man of quiet contemplation," he said, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Maybe you're just behind on hours." He chuckled, a deep sound that reached her. "Fair. But I wouldn't mind a few quiet afternoons with your thrilling company." Emma tried to keep her expression neutral, but she felt a helpless heat creep into her cheeks. They were assigned to sort and reshelve donations in the dusty back room of the school library. The work was quiet, the only sounds a steady hum of the air conditioner and the soft whisper of old pages. Lucian talked. Lightly. Casually. He told her stories about banned books and ridiculous school policies and the time he had tried and failed to escape detention through a window. Emma listened, her heart a little more open with each story. She replied only when necessary, but she found herself laughing more than once. He noticed. "See," he said one day, holding up a tattered copy of The Catcher in the Rye. "Told you I'd make you laugh." "That wasn't you. It was Holden Caulfield." "Harsh," he said, but his grin softened. She smiled. He grinned back. And for a moment the world felt a little warmer, a little softer. But reality returned swiftly. On the bus home that day, Emma overheard 2 girls whispering 2 rows ahead. "Did you hear? Lucian Carter's dad is the one funding the new auditorium. Explains everything. He probably gets away with murder." Emma looked out the window, the rain-streaked glass blurring the world. She remembered the stories. Lucian's father was some sort of real estate mogul, a man of power and influence. There were rumors of private jets, sprawling mansions, designer clothes she couldn't even name. Lucian never flaunted any of it, but he never denied it either. Her stomach knotted into a hard, cold ball. She had exactly $14.32 left in her wallet. That night, when her mom came home with deep shadows under her eyes and a tired slump to her shoulders, Emma sat at the kitchen table with her scholarship essays. The one about resilience in the face of hardship blurred before her eyes. She didn't cry. But she didn't write either. The next day, Lucian handed her a folded napkin during their library shift. "You're always scribbling in that planner," he said softly. "Figured you'd like this quote." Emma unfolded it, her fingers trembling slightly. "The stars incline us, they do not bind us." Shakespeare. She looked up at him, her heart beating a desperate, hopeful rhythm. Lucian shrugged, his eyes gentle and knowing. "Thought it was fitting. You always look like you're trying to outrun fate." Emma didn't know what to say, because he was right. Chapter 2. Rumors and Reveries. It started with a rumor. A sharp, careless whisper in the girls' restroom between 3rd and 4th period, a place Emma had fled to escape the rain and the noisy spiraling of her own thoughts. The voices were all too familiar, sharp with adolescent cruelty, and glossy with the unearned confidence of the socially untouchable. Lucian totally hooked up with Rachel behind the bleachers yesterday. Ugh. Again. That's like the 3rd girl this month. Whatever. It's Lucian. Rules don't apply to him. Emma froze in the stall, her fingers tightening around the worn strap of her bag. A hot, unfamiliar bitterness tightened in her throat, a feeling she wouldn't dare to name. She waited, holding her breath, until the laughter faded and the door slammed shut. She then stepped out, stared at her own pale reflection under the flickering fluorescent lights, and felt a quiet, burning shame for being so foolish, for wanting so much. That afternoon in the library, Lucian was late. Emma didn't mind. In fact, she preferred it. Her heart seemed to forget its place in her chest whenever he was near, and her carefully built logic cracked like old glass under the weight of his attention. She focused on organizing the donation cart, her movements precise and deliberate. Romance novels in one stack, political biographies in another. Then a familiar voice, soft and low, broke through the hush of the library. "Sorry I'm late. Got caught up saving the world." Emma didn't look at him. "You're supposed to be reshelving the history section." He moved beside her anyway, his presence a warmth she could feel without seeing. "What? Not even a hello?" "Hello," she said flatly, her eyes still on a stack of novels. "Bad day?" "No. Just realistic." Lucian blinked, a quiet pause stretching between them. "Okay, was that aimed at me?" "No," she lied, the word tasting like dust on her tongue. He crouched beside her, the soft fabric of his hoodie brushing against a dusty volume. "You always do that. Pull away when something's bothering you." Emma finally met his gaze and the world seemed to hold its breath. "I don't pull away. I just don't overshare." "Fine. Don't share then. Just tell me if I did something." His voice was lighter than usual, but a fragile thread of genuine concern was woven beneath it. He leaned in, and Emma could smell the faint scent of rain and clean laundry clinging to his hair. Her silence stretched, a fragile, unspoken thing. She wanted to ask, "Did you really kiss Rachel? Do you even remember the small things you say to me?" But asking would be an act of vulnerability, a devastating confirmation of everything she feared, that she had allowed herself to care when he never, ever asked her to. So instead she handed him a stack of old paperbacks. "Start alphabetizing." Lucian raised a brow, a silent question in his eyes, but he took them without protest. After 30 minutes of comfortable silence, broken only by the soft rustle of pages, he spoke again. "You ever think rumors are like graffiti?" Emma glanced at him, intrigued despite herself. "What?" "They spread fast. Hard to erase. And most of the time, they're drawn by cowards who hide behind walls." She stared at him, a sudden flush of heat rising in her cheeks. Had he heard what people were saying? Was this his gentle roundabout way of denying it? She didn't respond, afraid of what her voice might reveal. He looked at her sideways, his dark eyes searching hers. "You believe everything you hear, Brooks?" She shrugged, a small, involuntary gesture of self-protection. "I don't believe anything. But I remember everything." Lucian studied her for a long, quiet moment, then nodded slowly as if he understood more than she had meant to reveal. The following week passed in a blur of schoolwork and scholarship applications. Emma buried herself in the safe predictability of deadlines, desperate to forget the quiet ache of wanting someone she couldn't have. Lucian didn't push. He was there, in the library in class, but he gave her space. And in an odd, unexpected way that made it worse. Because he hadn't done anything wrong. Because he was kind and funny and thoughtful in a way no one else seemed to see. Because if he were just the shallow playboy everyone believed, she could walk away and move on. But he wasn't. Not completely. And that made him truly, wonderfully, terrifyingly dangerous. Friday brought a rare, welcome sunlit lunch break. Emma sat on the edge of the courtyard fountain, a heavy textbook on her lap and an unopened sandwich beside her, lost in thought. "Guess what?" a voice said behind her, soft and familiar. She didn't need to turn. Lucian dropped into the space beside her, sunglasses pushed up into his dark hair, his shirt sleeves rolled haphazardly to reveal the sharp, defined lines of his forearms. "They're showing Casablanca at the Independent Theater on May next weekend." Emma blinked, surprised. "That's random. You like old movies, right?" She hesitated, her heart beginning its familiar, clumsy dance. "How do you know that?" "You were humming as time goes by, last week during cataloging. Don't deny it." She stared at him, speechless, a wave of heat washing over her. He grinned, a genuine, dazzling smile that made her breath catch. "Caught you. So what, you're inviting me?" Lucian shrugged, the casual gesture belaying the sudden tension in the air. "Maybe." Emma closed her book with a soft thud. "You can't just throw things like that out and expect." "I can't ask you to watch a movie with me?" "You're not serious." "Why not?" She narrowed her eyes, a familiar fear tightening its grip on her chest. "Because people like you don't date girls like me." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, raw and full of the weight of her fears. The air between them stilled, the sunlight suddenly feeling thin and cold. Lucian tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "People like me? You know what I mean," she said, her voice small. "Actually, I don't. Why don't you explain it to me?" Emma stood up abruptly, her pulse thundering in her ears like a frantic drum. "I need to go." He rose too, but didn't reach for her. "You're always running from something, Emma." She turned away, her throat tight with unsaid words. But his next words stopped her cold, a whisper that felt like a shout. "You think I don't notice you staring?" Her breath caught, held hostage in her lungs. "You think I haven't watched you memorize every lesson, take care of everyone you meet, and shrink every time someone calls attention to you?" His voice was quiet now, without a hint of accusation, just a profound, cutting honesty. "You think I don't see how hard you try to be invisible?" Emma couldn't move. She stood there, a statue of vulnerability, her back to him. Lucian stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, but he still didn't touch her. "You're not invisible to me." She blinked rapidly, her eyes burning, the truth of his words a painful, beautiful revelation. "I don't care about rumors," he added softly. "And I don't play games." She looked up at him then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I do." Lucian's expression changed, the shadows in his eyes deepening, softening. "Then tell me how to win." Emma didn't look back. She walked away from the courtyard, her steps quick and desperate, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Lucian's words played on an endless loop in her head. "You're not invisible to me. Then tell me how to win." What did that even mean? She hated how her body had betrayed her, how her breath had hitched, how her fingers had curled, aching to reach for him even as her mind screamed to run. She had built her life on a foundation of order, on plans, on keeping things in their proper, predictable places. Lucian Carter didn't fit into any of those. He was a gentle, beautiful form of chaos. And worse, he made her want things she had no right to want, things that were fragile and terrifying and real. By the time she got home, the house was empty. A note on the counter, a familiar scrawl of worry read, "Dinner at the hospital cafeteria. Long shift tonight. Don't wait up. Love, Mom." Emma stared at the handwriting, then at the flickering light of the fridge, and felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle like a stone in her chest. She poured herself a bowl of cereal and sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through an interpreting textbook she checked out from the public library. She didn't know why. Maybe because it reminded her of a future that felt safe, predictable, clean. But her mind wouldn't settle. It kept drifting back to Lucian. His voice, his eyes, that maddeningly gentle tone he'd used, half tease, half a quiet, desperate plea. "You think I haven't watched you?" Emma pressed the heel of her palm against her chest, right over her thundering heart. Why was he doing this? She wasn't pretty like the girls he usually flirted with. She didn't have a last name that opened doors or an aura that lit up rooms. She was Emma Brooks, quiet, practical, half hidden behind thrift store sweaters and perfect test scores. If he was teasing her, it was a cruelty she didn't think she could endure. If he was serious, it was the most terrifying, wonderful thing she could ever imagine. The next few days blurred into a mechanical routine. Emma buried herself in studying and tutoring, carefully avoiding any route that might lead her past Lucian. In the library, she came early and left before their scheduled shifts. When he wasn't around, she felt a fragile, temporary relief. When he was, she pretended not to notice. But he noticed. One afternoon, as she was walking out of math club, she found a sticky note on the inside cover of her notebook. "You're doing that disappearing act again." Still waiting for instructions on how to win. No name. No signature. But she knew. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into the back pocket of her planner, a secret she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Saturday afternoon brought another surprise. She was exiting the public library, her arms full of borrowed books, when she saw him. Lucian leaned against the lamppost outside, his sunglasses pushed up on his head, one hand buried in his hoodie pocket. He looked out of place there, too sharp, too expensive, too utterly himself, but he didn't seem to mind. He straightened as she approached. Emma stopped a few feet away, clutching her books tight. "How did you know I was here?" He shrugged, a small, easy smile on his face. "Asked someone. Stalking is illegal, you know?" Lucian's grin widened. "It's only stalking if it's creepy. I'm charming." Emma rolled her eyes, but a smile was fighting its way onto her lips. "I just wanted to talk," he added more gently. "Lucian. No games. Promise." His voice softened, a promise in the air. Look, I know I'm not the guy who wins spelling bees or aces chemistry or has his future mapped out with bullet points, but I notice things. I notice you. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I know you're scared, he continued, his eyes full of a quiet understanding. But I'm not here to mess with you. I want a chance. She shifted uncomfortably, the books in her arms feeling impossibly heavy. You don't even know me. I want to, he said simply, his gaze unwavering. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it, looking down at her shoes. I'm not someone who dates, she said at last, the words sounding small and hollow. I have too many things to focus on. College, work, family. I don't have time to play around. Lucian stepped closer, his voice a soft, beautiful caress in the afternoon air. Then don't play. Just be honest. She looked up, a fragile hope unfurling in her chest. Do you like me? He asked. It wasn't smug. It wasn't flirtatious. It was quiet. It was vulnerable. Emma's chest constricted with the weight of the question. Yes, she whispered, a secret confession. Then louder before she could stop herself. Yes. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea. Lucian's lips curved, not into a smirk, but into a real, breathtaking smile. Good ideas are overrated. Emma shook her head, a fragile, disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. You're impossible. And yet here you are, he said softly, his voice full of a quiet triumph. They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. But they walked to the train station together that day, the sun painting the world in shades of soft gold. Lucian talked about his favorite horror films, and Emma found herself correcting his grammar. He laughed and said she was exhausting, and she told him he needed to expand his vocabulary. It was the easiest, most effortless conversation she'd ever had, and the hardest thing she'd ever wanted to believe in. That night, Emma opened her journal again. March 22nd, he asked if I liked him. I said yes. I didn't mean to, but I don't regret it. She paused, then wrote another line, her heart a fragile, hopeful thing. I don't know what happens next, but for the first time in a long time, I want to find out. Chapter 3, The Night of the Gala. The school gymnasium had been transformed beyond recognition. Gone were the harsh fluorescent lights and the echoing squeak of basketball shoes. In their place, the room was bathed in the warm, gentle glow of flickering faux candles, its walls draped in soft satin. A quiet, melodic jazz floated through the air, weaving the sweet scent of catered finger food with the delicate perfume of teenage anticipation. Emma Brooks stood near the back wall, clutching a clipboard to her chest like a fragile wooden shield. She hadn't planned to be here. But when Mrs. Donnelly from the events committee had asked for a responsible, detail-oriented volunteer to oversee the silent auction for the annual spring charity gala, Emma's name had been the first one to come to mind. So here she was, in a navy blue dress borrowed from her cousin, her hair pulled into a careful, severe bun, her lips tinted with the faintest hint of gloss. She felt like an intruder, an imposter in a beautiful, unfamiliar dream. Lucian wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's what she told herself. He didn't seem to care for school events. His social life operated on its own schedule, off-campus parties, bonfires by the lake, art galleries with people twice his age. But when she glanced toward the entrance, she saw him. He walked in with the same quiet confidence she'd grown to crave, a dark suit tailored to his lean frame, a loosened tie at his throat, his hair still damp with the soft mist of the evening rain. Her breath caught, a butterfly trapped in her chest. He hadn't seen her yet. She didn't want him to. Emma busied herself with silent auction slips and felt the heat of his presence from across the room. She managed polite smiles, grateful comments, and even the occasional polite thank you from a parent she didn't recognize. The work gave her hands something to do, something other than fidget with the tight seams of a dress that didn't quite feel like her own. Then a familiar voice, soft and low, spoke directly behind her. Do I get bonus points if I donate and flirt at the same time? Emma didn't turn, but a small, involuntary smile touched her lips. That depends on the quality of the flirting. Lucian stepped beside her, his dark eyes dancing with a mischievous light. Tough crowd. She finally let herself look at him. I thought you hated school events. I do, he said, his gaze not leaving hers. But I heard you'd be here. Emma's heart gave a dangerous lurch, a sudden, dizzying drop. I'm working, she said, her voice a little breathless. I noticed. You look very efficient. She raised a brow, the corner of her lips twitching. That's your compliment? Lucian chuckled, the sound a low, beautiful rumble. You also look beautiful. But I figured you'd trust the first one more. She shook her head, a soft blush coloring her cheeks. "You're insufferable. And yet still charming," he said, placing a silent bid on a basket of movie vouchers. "See? I can multitask." Emma looked at him, then really looked. The genuine kindness in his smile. The way he stood slightly angled toward her, as if to close the small empty space between them. The unmistakable sincerity behind the glint of humor in his eyes. She felt the air shift, becoming charged, becoming something more. "You should go enjoy the party," she said softly, the words a gentle push. "I am." For the next hour he stayed. Not hovering. Not pestering. Just there. He helped direct guests to the correct table when her hands were full, his fingers brushing hers with a casual intimacy that felt anything but. He cracked jokes with a passing teacher that made Emma stifle a laugh behind her clipboard. At one point he even managed to swap her clipboard for a glass of sparkling water, a grand, playful flourish that made her heart ache with a quiet tenderness. It was maddening how easily he existed in her space, and how much she didn't want him to leave. The slow jazz melody changed to something livelier. The lights dimmed further, casting long golden shadows across the dance floor. Couples drifted forward, some awkward, others graceful. Laughter rang out, and the music swelled with a sense of vibrant life. Lucian leaned in, his voice a warm murmur in her ear. "You want to dance?" Emma froze, the clipboard a desperate anchor. "I can't." He held up a hand. "I'll hold the clipboard hostage." "Lucian. Just one dance." His tone wasn't demanding. It was hopeful. Gentle. And in the quiet way he looked at her, she saw a flicker of something vulnerable. Emma hesitated. Then, her heart making the decision for her, she nodded. He led her toward the edge of the floor, not quite into the center of the crowd, but far enough away from the food tables that it felt intentional, like their own private corner of the world. One hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with a natural grace, and the other settled on her waist with a casual, precise touch that sent a shiver through her. She stiffened, a reflex of fear. "I promise not to spin you into a wall," he murmured, a hint of a smile in his voice. She glanced up, her heart a frantic bird in a cage. "That's reassuring." "You're shaking," he whispered, his eyes soft with concern. She tried to laugh, a breathy, uneven sound. "It's the dress. You look beautiful in it." "Then it's you," she said, the words a whispered confession. Lucian's eyes flickered with something unreadable, a deep, quiet emotion she couldn't name. "Am I that scary?" Emma swallowed, the truth a lump in her throat. "You're not scary. Just confusing." "I can live with that." Their hands shifted slightly, his fingers tightening around hers, and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Everything about this moment felt unreal. The lights, the music, the warmth of his hand on her waist. It felt like a dream she'd had 1,000 times but never dared to believe could be real. And that made it terrifying. Because dreams didn't last. The song ended. Lucian didn't move away right away. He looked at her with a softness that made her want to cry, a tenderness that felt like a quiet, dangerous promise. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "You look beautiful tonight." Emma's smile was fragile, a ghost of a thing. "You're terrible for my focus." "Good. You study too much anyway." He stepped back, a small space opening between them, and handed her the clipboard again with a mock bow. "Until our next shift, Miss Brooks." And then he was gone, lost in the blur of sequins, laughter, and jazz chords. Emma stood perfectly still, the clipboard clutched to her chest, wondering how someone who didn't fit into any of her plans had started to feel like part of her future. The gala ended in a blur of laughter, camera flashes, and thank you speeches. By the time Emma helped roll the last tablecloth into the storage bin, her feet ached and her cheeks were sore from smiling. But her heart, that fragile, traitorous thing, felt lighter and more alive than it had in months. Lucian hadn't spoken to her again after their dance. He hadn't needed to. The simple pressure of his hand in hers had said more than any words ever could. She told herself it meant nothing. Just a moment. A fleeting high school dance. But when she lay in bed that night, the borrowed dress a crumpled heap beside her chair and her heels abandoned near the door, she let herself write in the journal again. March 28th, he danced with me. No jokes. No teasing. Just warmth. Stillness. I don't know what to do with that kind of kindness. By Monday, reality had returned with a sharp, familiar clarity. Emma tried to focus on school again. The stack of scholarship essays on her desk loomed like a mountain she couldn't quite climb. Her mother's cough had worsened over the weekend, and though she swore she was fine, Emma had caught her wincing and rubbing her lower back more than once. Lucian too was different. Not cold. Not distant. But quieter. Their library shifts resumed, but he arrived late, left early, and didn't crack any jokes. The playful ease between them was gone, replaced by a strained, fragile silence. Emma tried to pretend it didn't bother her. Maybe the gala had just been a beautiful detour. A pleasant accident. Maybe this was how it ended. On Wednesday, the rumor mill churned again. Emma was heading toward the vending machines when she heard it. Two girls leaning against the lockers, their voices dripping with casual cruelty as they scrolled through their phones. Did you see the pictures from the club party? Lucian and Ava looked so cozy. She even tagged him in her story. Emma didn't pause. She walked right past them, her heart thudding in slow, heavy beats. In her mind, Ava Moore's face formed with infuriating clarity, platinum blonde cheer captain, daughter of a tech executive, the kind of girl who owned 4 designer handbags before she could drive. Emma didn't need to check social media. She already knew it would hurt. She stayed late in the library that evening, even after Lucian had gone. The silence was a balm. Shelving books, sorting catalogs, these were things that made sense. That followed order. Unlike feelings. Unlike boys who danced with you one night and made headlines with someone else the next. When she finally got home, her mom was asleep on the couch, tissues on the floor and an empty pill bottle beside her. Emma cleaned up quietly, boiled water for tea, and sat down with a pile of mail that included another hospital bill. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. The next day, Lucian showed up for their shift on time. Emma didn't speak to him. She filed returns mechanically, her eyes trained on the barcodes. Lucian said nothing for the first 10 minutes. Then, "You okay?" She paused, a sharp, cold defensiveness rising in her throat. "I'm fine." "You're lying." She looked up sharply, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "What do you want from me, Lucian?" He blinked, taken aback. What? You show up at a party, you dance with me, and then 2 days later you're with someone else?" The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. "Do you just collect moments? Make people feel like they matter for fun?" Lucian's face darkened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine hurt flash through his eyes. "I wasn't with Ava." "Sure," Emma snapped, her voice trembling. "You just happened to be tagged in photos," arms around her. He took a step closer, his voice low but firm. "She was drunk. I helped her to her car. That's it." Emma froze, the world tilting. "You think I'd do that to you?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet incredulity. "I don't know what to think," she whispered, the fight draining from her. "Because none of this makes sense. You don't make sense." Lucian ran a hand through his hair, a sound of frustration in his throat. "Emma, I've liked you for years. I've tried to show you without scaring you off. But I'm not going to keep proving myself every time someone posts a photo." She looked away, ashamed, a burning heat rising in her cheeks. "I'm not good at this," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I don't know how to trust things that feel good." Lucian's expression softened, the frustration melting into a profound, gentle understanding. "That's not your fault." She felt tears pressing at her lashes and turned quickly, pretending to adjust a stack of books. "I'm just..." She exhaled, the sound a ragged breath. "I'm scared, Lucian." "I know." A long pause stretched between them, filled with a fragile, beautiful honesty. "I'm not going anywhere," he finally said. "Even if you don't pick me right now." Emma's throat tightened, the words a lifeline in the middle of a storm. "Take your time. But don't push me away just because you're afraid." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She replayed their conversation again and again, his voice so steady and so patient. His eyes full of a truth she wasn't ready to accept. She pulled out her journal. March 30th, he said he's liked me for years. I didn't know. I always thought I was invisible to him. Maybe I wanted to be, because if he saw me, really saw me, he'd know how broken I am. She closed the book. And for the first time she let herself cry. Not because she was heartbroken, but because maybe, just maybe, she wasn't. Not this time. Chapter 4. Cracks beneath the surface. Emma hadn't meant to start texting Lucian. Not really. It began with a single hesitant message the day after their fragile conversation in the library. "Emma, did you ever finish your English essay, or are you winging it again?" The reply came 3 minutes later, a fast, sure current in the sea of her carefully constructed life. "Lucian, winging it? Tradition must be honored. Want to proofread it and cry?" And just like that, the dam broke. They didn't text constantly, but enough. Enough that Emma found herself smiling at her phone in the middle of her bus ride, a private, fluttering joy. Enough that she walked a little slower in the halls, just in case their paths crossed. It was terrifying. And utterly, completely exhilarating. Their next shift in the library was different. Lucian brought her a coffee, placing it gently on the desk between them. It was exactly the way she liked it, one with hazelnut, a precise amount of cream. She stared at the cup, a small fortress of warmth. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He looked at her like it was obvious, a soft knowing in his eyes. "You always get the same thing when you tutor at the cafe. I pay attention." Emma's fingers tightened around the cup, the heat a steady comfort. "You really are dangerous." Lucian leaned in, his voice a low, teasing murmur. "Only if you run." She didn't. In small, tentative ways, Emma let him in. They talked more, not just about books or school, but about the fragile, beautiful truths they held in their hearts. She told him her favorite poem, The Quiet Fury of Do Not Go Gentle by Dylan Thomas. She confessed her childhood obsession with space documentaries, and the surprising comfort she found in the sound of the first drops of rain on a window pane. Lucian listened, like no one ever had. He absorbed her words, her secrets, her quiet little joys, and held them with a reverence that took her breath away. In return, he told her about his mother's love of abstract art, a fierce passion she passed on to him. He admitted his ridiculous hatred for oysters, a deep-seated culinary grudge. And then he told her about his biggest regret, not joining the basketball team when Coach Martin had asked in sophomore year. "I didn't want to give my dad another excuse to show up in the middle of practice and pretend we were close," he admitted, his voice quiet, vulnerable. Emma didn't say anything. She just reached across the desk and gently, ever so gently, tapped her fingers against his. A simple gesture. A silent, powerful promise. He looked at her like she'd just given him oxygen. But even as things grew easier between them, reality loomed, a dark, heavy shadow. Emma's mother's persistent cough turned into something more. She insisted it was allergies, but Emma wasn't naive. The bills piled higher. She picked up more tutoring hours, started skipping lunch to save money, and spent nights filling out scholarship applications until her vision blurred from exhaustion. Lucian noticed. He noticed everything. "You're thinner," he said one afternoon, his brow furrowed with concern as he held out half of his sandwich. "I'm fine." "You always say that." "Because it's true." But it wasn't. And Lucian knew it. One Thursday afternoon, Emma's phone rang while she was in the middle of sorting the return bin. She didn't recognize the number, but a cold knot of dread twisted in her gut. She answered. "Miss Brooks? This is Dr. Harrow from Mercy West." Emma's breath caught, a silent, trapped thing. "I'm calling about your mother." The hospital was sterile and too bright, but the words were darker than anything Emma had ever braced herself for. "Pneumonia. Complications. A weakened immune system. Her condition is stable," the doctor assured her, "but we'd like to keep her overnight for observation. Just in case." Emma nodded numbly, her hands clenched in her lap. The nurse handed her a clipboard full of paperwork. The insurance information was outdated, the copay a stinging slap of reality. She signed anyway. Lucian showed up an hour later. Emma didn't know how he found her. She didn't ask. He walked in quietly, no questions, just sat beside her in the waiting room and offered her a protein bar and a bottle of water. She took them silently, the simple kindness of the gesture unraveling her. He waited until she finished eating before speaking. "What do you need?" Emma blinked, the words echoing in the vast, empty space of her fear. "What? Right now. What do you need?" She almost said, "Nothing." But her throat burned too much to lie. So she whispered, "I don't know." Lucian leaned back, his arm resting along the top of the chair beside her, a steady, comforting presence. "Then I'll stay until you figure it out." Emma exhaled shakily, the sound a soft, painful release. "You don't have to." "I want to." Silence. Then Emma whispered, "She's all I have." Lucian turned his head toward her, his eyes full of a quiet understanding. "You have more than you think." Her eyes welled with tears, not just from exhaustion or fear, but from the simple, profound beauty of hearing someone say that, and meaning it. That night, when she got home, the apartment felt even colder than usual. The lights didn't work in the hallway, another small failure she couldn't afford to fix. She curled up in bed in her clothes, pulled her hoodie over her face and stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed, a small, gentle vibration. "Lucian, hey. Still with you. Even if it's silent." Emma stared at the screen until her vision blurred. "Emma, you don't owe me anything." Lucian, "Good. Then I'm free to care." Emma didn't want to be seen like this. Worn down. Hollow-eyed. Fractured. But Lucian saw her anyway. He showed up the next morning with coffee, a warm bagel, and a look that said, "I won't ask unless you want to tell me." They didn't talk much, just sat under the awning near the back entrance of school, watching the gray drizzle coat the pavement. "She hates hospitals," Emma murmured eventually, staring at the steam rising from her cup. "Always said they smelled like endings." Lucian nodded, his silence a perfect, gentle invitation. "I used to think if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, things would fix themselves. But they never do." Lucian's voice was gentle, a soft counterpoint to the quiet patter of the rain. "You don't have to fix everything on your own." Emma looked at him, her eyes raw with a fear she couldn't hide. "I don't know how not to." And Lucian, to his credit, didn't offer empty cliches. Didn't try to fix her. He just reached over, touched her hand briefly, a soft, warm anchor in her storm, and said, "Then let me learn with you." But learning to let someone in wasn't simple. It was a slow, painful process. Emma still walked fast through the halls, avoided unnecessary conversations, and refused every ride Lucian offered to and from the hospital. She hated the way pity settled in people's eyes, how it felt like a heavy weight pressing on her shoulders. Worse, she hated how much she wanted to lean on him. "You don't have to pretend you're fine," Lucian said one afternoon, his voice quiet with a heartbreaking sincerity after she'd faked a smile in the cafeteria. Emma took a sip of her juice, the cold liquid a sharp contrast to the heat in her cheeks. "If I don't, I'll fall apart." "Is that what you want?" "I want the truth," he said quietly. "Even if it's messy." Her mask cracked just a little. "I'm scared all the time, Lucian. Of losing her. Of losing control. Of you walking away when things get hard." "I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now," she whispered, the words thin with a long-held fear. Lucian's brow furrowed, a quiet pain in his eyes. "What do I have to do to prove I mean it?" Emma looked down, ashamed of her own doubt, her own vulnerability. "You already are. And that's the part that scares me." The next week passed in fragments. Emma bounced between classes, hospital visits, and late-night essay edits. Her mother's condition stabilized, but bills continued to arrive in relentless waves. Emma sold a pair of earrings she'd received for her 16th birthday. Then her watch. Then her half-used textbooks from last semester. Lucian noticed. One evening after library duty, he handed her a folded envelope. "What's this?" she asked warily, her guard immediately up. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture. "A job." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of job?" "A family friend owns an auction house. They need an assistant to help manage event files. Paperwork, translating a few documents from French, cataloging items. You'd be amazing at it." Emma frowned. "Is this charity?" "It's a paid job, Emma." "How did you even?" "I just asked around." "You don't have to say yes." Her hands tightened on the envelope, the paper feeling heavy and precious. He added softly, "I know you hate accepting help. But this isn't a handout. You're overqualified." Emma hesitated. Then, with a quiet, fragile acceptance, she took the envelope and tucked it into her bag. That weekend she started the job. The auction house was a world away from her reality, glass walls, velvet chairs, the soft whisper of antique jewelry and vintage wine catalogs. But the work was familiar. Structured. Safe. She translated catalog entries during lunch breaks and filed client names alphabetically with the kind of meticulous precision only anxiety could teach. She didn't tell anyone at school except Lucian. One evening, while riding the bus home, she texted him, a small, tentative reaching out. "Emma, okay, you were right. It's not terrible." "Lucian, that's the closest I'll ever get to thank you." "Huh?" "Emma, don't get greedy." "Lucian, never. Just proud of you." She stared at that last message longer than she'd ever admit. The next day, she found a small note in her locker. Folded twice with careful, deliberate penmanship. "You shine even when you're tired. Stop trying to hide it." There was no name. But she didn't need one. Emma folded the note into her wallet. And later that night, she read it 3 times before bed, the words a silent, gentle prayer. But progress wasn't linear. One rainy Wednesday, after a brutal midterm and another late-night hospital visit, Emma snapped. Lucian caught her on the stairs behind the gym, soaked from practice, his jacket slung over his shoulder, his presence a soft warmth in the gray air. "You okay?" he asked, his voice filled with a familiar, gentle concern. Emma laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and painful. "Why do you always ask that like you expect a different answer?" He blinked, a flicker of hurt in his eyes. "Because one day you might give me one." "I can't do this," she said suddenly, the words tearing out of her. "This, whatever we're doing." Lucian's eyes dimmed, the light in them going out. Why? Because it's not fair. You get to go home to your perfect life and your perfect family, and I get bills, stress, and a mother who might not wake up tomorrow. He didn't flinch, but he took a step forward, closing the space between them. My life isn't perfect. Emma pressed on, her voice raw with a deep-seated pain. But you don't get it. You never will. And that's okay. Just stop pretending you can fix me. I'm not trying to fix you. Then what are you doing? Lucian's voice cracked, a beautiful, vulnerable break in his composure. Loving you. Emma froze. Time stood still, the rain a silent backdrop to the shattering of her heart. Then quietly he added, even if you don't believe you deserve it. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Her heart was breaking open too fast, too wide, too beautifully for her to comprehend. So she did what she always did when things got too big. She ran. Chapter 5. The distance between. Emma didn't speak to Lucian for 4 days. Not because she hated him, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know how to live with the impossible weight of his words. Loving you. It had cracked something deep inside her, a fissure in the foundation of the person she had carefully constructed. Emma Brooks wasn't built for fractures. She was built for control, for precision, for endurance. Love wasn't part of the plan. Not now. Not when her world felt like it could collapse with one more medical diagnosis or one missing paycheck. So she did what she always did. She buried it. She kept herself busy, a constant, frantic motion designed to outrun her own thoughts. Extra shifts at the auction house. Evening tutoring. The quiet sting of scholarship rejections. Late-night exam prep. Her days became a blur of noise and deadlines, a constant, exhausting hum that left no room for thought. Still he lingered. In the background. In the hallways. In the silence between her thoughts. Lucian didn't push. He didn't text or ask questions or corner her in the library. He just gave her space. And somehow that made it worse. Because it proved what she already feared. He meant it. He loved her. And he wasn't trying to win. He was just waiting. On Friday, her mother came home from her follow-up scan with a tired but genuine smile. The doctor said things are improving, she said, her voice still a little hoarse. Still fragile, but a step in the right direction. Emma felt a tight knot loosen in her chest. Relief. But also a quiet, heavy guilt. Because she hadn't told her mother anything about Lucian. Not the auction house job he'd found for her. Not the dance. Not the note in her locker or the library shifts where his fingertips had brushed hers in the quiet between returned books. She didn't know how to explain a boy who made her feel both utterly seen and profoundly afraid. That evening, Emma sat at the dining table long after her mother had gone to bed, staring at her journal. She hadn't written anything in a week. Not since Lucian had said he loved her. She picked up her pen, her fingers trembling slightly. April 4th, he said he loved me. And I believed him. That's the worst part. I believed every word. She paused, ink pooling at the edge of a half-finished sentence. But what do I do with that kind of truth when I'm still trying to believe in myself? She closed the book, the questions left hanging in the quiet air. The following day, she arrived at the auction house a few minutes early, intending to finish the French translation of a necklace's provenance letter. The receptionist handed her a small, delicately wrapped box. "Delivery for you," she said with a knowing smile. Emma frowned. From who? No name. Just said it was for the girl who forgets to look in mirrors. Her breath caught, a sharp, disbelieving gasp. Inside the box was a velvet pouch. And inside that, a simple, elegant silver pendant. A tiny, perfect star was etched on one side. Behind it, a small card with 3 words written in his familiar, sharp print. Still here. Elle. Emma sat down hard on the nearest chair, her heart thudding in her ears. She closed her hand around the delicate necklace, her fingers curling around the cool metal. Not because she needed it, but because it reminded her she wasn't alone. Later that evening, after closing up the office and catching the bus, Emma walked home in a daze of thoughts. She found herself standing outside Lucian's house. She didn't remember deciding to go there. She just needed to. The Carter estate was exactly what she imagined. Tall gates, perfectly trimmed hedges, soft-lit windows glowing with a quiet, undeniable wealth. But it wasn't the size of the house that made her hesitate, it was the thought of him inside, possibly not expecting her. She stepped up to the intercom and pressed the button. His voice crackled through a moment later. "Emma?" She froze, her heart hammering. "Yeah." Pause. Then, gates unlocked. "Just push." The walkway curved around a beautiful fountain and up to a wide oak door. Lucian was already outside when she reached it, his hoodie pulled on over sweatpants, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked surprised. And then a fragile, cautious hope filled his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. "No," she said honestly, the word a quiet admission of defeat. "But I'm here." Lucian nodded, stepping aside to let her in, the simple gesture feeling like a profound invitation. They sat on the back patio, overlooking a quiet garden of lavender and stone benches. The night was cool, peaceful. Emma stared at the vast canvas of the sky. "They always feel closer when it's quiet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Lucian didn't ask what she meant. Instead, he simply handed her a soft blanket. "You didn't have to come. I wanted to." A long, comfortable silence passed between them. Then Emma whispered, "I've never let anyone help me." "Not really." Lucian nodded, his understanding a silent comfort. "I know. I thought if I admitted I needed someone, it made me weak." "It doesn't." Emma looked at him, her eyes searching his in the soft light of the moon. "But I'm scared I'll get used to you. That I'll expect you to stay." Lucian's voice was steady, a rock in her storm. "Then I'll stay." Her throat tightened with emotion. "I don't want to be another sad story you tell at a party one day." "You won't be," he said, his voice full of a quiet conviction. "You're the story I haven't figured out how to stop reading." Emma laughed softly, the sound a mix of joy and tears. And for the first time she didn't feel broken. Just unfinished. Emma stayed on the Carter patio until almost midnight. They didn't kiss. They didn't even hold hands. But something fundamental shifted between them. A quiet trust settled in the spaces where fear used to live. When she finally stood to leave, Lucian walked her to the gate. Just before she passed through it, he paused and said, "You don't have to be fearless. Just let me stand beside you when you're scared." She didn't reply. She just nodded and smiled. It was enough. For the next week, life softened around the edges. Emma still worked too much, worried too often, and slept too little. But something had shifted. She started bringing Lucian homemade muffins when she had time. He wrote her little quotes on napkins and slipped them into her textbooks, tiny, secret promises of his affection. "You're smiling more," her mother said one evening, watching her chop vegetables. Emma froze mid-slice. "Am I?" Her mom gave her a knowing, gentle look. "Is it a boy?" Emma flushed, the heat a welcome warmth. "Maybe." Her mother smiled faintly. "Tell him thank you. I haven't seen you look like this in a long time." Emma said nothing. But later that night, she texted Lucian. "Emma, my mom noticed. I blame you." "Lucian, tell her I accept full responsibility for your joy." That weekend, Lucian invited her to a private event hosted by his family's foundation, an art auction at a boutique gallery downtown. "You don't have to come," he said, his voice gentle. "But I want to show you my world. Even if it's not perfect." Emma hesitated. The idea of stepping into Lucian's life, into that life, made her chest tighten with a familiar anxiety. High society, whispers behind glasses of champagne, women with manicured hands and names on plaques. She didn't belong there. But she said yes anyway. Because she wanted to try. Because she wanted him. The gallery was dazzling. White walls, abstract paintings, the soft, easy rhythm of jazz playing through hidden speakers. Waiters carried flutes of champagne on silver trays. Emma wore a pale lavender dress borrowed from her cousin again, but this time with heels and soft waves in her hair. She felt like she was performing a role, a fragile character in a world she didn't understand. Lucian, in his tailored suit and quiet confidence, looked like he was born to this place. She didn't. But the moment he saw her, his eyes lit up, and his smile was a beacon just for her. "You're stunning," he whispered, offering his arm with a gentle formality. Emma clutched it tightly, her fingers digging into the fabric of his suit. "Don't let go." "Never." At first things went well. Lucian introduced her to a few family friends, and she nodded and smiled through polite conversations about emerging artists and investment portfolios. No one was unkind. But no one looked directly at her either. She was a silent accessory to his presence. Until she arrived. Caleb Sinclair's mother. A tall, elegant woman in navy blue. Lucian's aunt by marriage. She glanced at Emma's shoes once before smiling a cool, disarming smile. "And you are?" "Emma Brooks," Emma said, her voice firm but steady. Lucian's gentle hand found the small of her back, a warm, grounding presence. "She's with me." "Oh," the woman said lightly, her voice dripping with sugar and condescension. "How refreshing. We do like when Lucian branches out." Emma froze, the words sharp and pointed. Lucian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Excuse us. They walked away without another word. Emma only exhaled when they reached a quieter corner, a small hidden alcove filled with sculptures. Lucian turned to her, his eyes full of a quiet fury. You okay? I'm fine, she said automatically, the lie a comfort. You don't have to be. I know, she said. Then added, her voice small, but this is your world. I don't want to embarrass you. Lucian's eyes darkened with a quiet intensity. Emma, don't ever say that. She looked away ashamed. I'm trying. I know, he said, and his voice softened. And I'm proud of you. Emma looked up, a fragile hope unfurling in her chest. Even when I can't speak French fluently and I don't know what Rothko's early work looks like? Lucian grinned, the light returning to his eyes. Especially then. But the evening left a mark. Emma felt it as they walked back to the car, her heels in her hand, the silence between them heavy with unspoken things. Lucian offered to drive her home, and she accepted without protest. When they reached her apartment building, he turned off the engine but didn't move. I know tonight was hard, he said, his voice low. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It is. I should have said something when she spoke to you like that. Emma gave a tired smile. It doesn't matter. It does, he insisted, his voice firm. You don't have to fit into their world. That's not why He stopped himself, a familiar hesitation in his voice. She waited, her heart pounding. Lucian exhaled, the sound a soft confession. That's not why I love you. Emma stared at him, the words a gentle blow. For a long moment she didn't know what to say. Then she whispered, You make me want to believe that I could be more than I am. Lucian leaned closer, his forehead touching hers, the small, quiet gesture a universe of intimacy. You already are. And in that quiet moment, barefoot, exhausted and wrapped in doubt, Emma let herself believe. Thank you for listening to Silent Heart Story, where every love that couldn't be said is finally heard. If today's story touched something quiet in you, a memory, a secret wish, or simply the feeling of being seen, then stay with us. Subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a heartbeat. Every day, a new whisper awaits.